Committee members?
Senator,
Hi,
how you doing?
better than to zero.
I agree.
Senator Lippincott?
Laura.
Time to get started.
We got a five this year.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5,
You did count.
6. Rob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, they give me 3 minutes.
We're still on agencies. So,
Maybe when we're done with that.
yes, the general public will be 3 minutes, but we're still on agencies now. And if we could get started, please. Can we shut the doors? Thank you. All right, we ended with Department of Corrections. State Historical Society would be the next agency, and seeing no representative. So the Oil and Gas Commission would be next. Is there a representative for them? Oil and Gas Commission? Seeing none, we'll move on. State Patrol. Is there a State Patrol representative? Seeing none. Department of Administrative Services. I don't see a person there. Foster Care Review Office would be next. Welcome. Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. For the committee, this is Foster Care Review Office, with who's testifying now.
Thank you, Foster Care.
Yes, and welcome.
Thank you. Chairperson Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Heidi Orr. It's Heidi. The last name is Orr, O-R-E. And I am the Foster Care Review Office's, the FCRO's Administrative Program Officer, appearing on behalf of our Executive Director, Monica Gross. I offer this testimony in opposition to LB2. The Foster Care Review Office is the independent state agency responsible for reviewing, tracking, and reporting on Nebraska's foster children in out-of-home care in Nebraska and overseeing their safety, permanency, and well-being. Since 1982, the Foster Care Review Office has worked to assure foster children's safety, permanency, and well-being by providing critical, timely information to decision makers on an individual case and a systemic level. Our work brings transparency, accountability, critical oversight to the child welfare system, provides accurate and current data to senators, policymakers, service providers, and the public. The Foster Care Review Office efficiently provides oversight through reviewing and tracking children and youth in out-of-home care for half a penny for every dollar budgeted for the Department of Health and Human Services and its child welfare service contractors, the Office of Juvenile Services, and the Administrative Office of Courts and Probation combined. Cutting the Foster Care Review Office's base and carryover funding will directly jeopardize the safety and well-being of Nebraska's children and youth in foster care. LB2's proposed base reduction of $250,000 will result in immediate staff layoffs. This cut represents more than 10% of our base appropriation. Staff layoffs could mean that 750 Nebraska children and youth in out-of-home care under the child welfare and juvenile justice systems would no longer receive citizen review benefits. Of an independent review of the plans, safety services, placements, or case progress. Less data would be collected, less information would be shared with legal parties, and about 45 citizen reviewers would no longer be able to volunteer their time. A decrease in the foster care review office's general funds would also cause a proportionate decrease in federal Title IV funding, which would lead to further cuts for our agency. LB2's proposed carryover reduction of $250,000 reduces the foster care review office's unexpended funds that is accrued over time, which has been earmarked for critical IT projects used to develop, update, and enhance our independent tracking system, FACS. The FCRO does this ongoing work without requesting additional funds from the legislature. Please note that the FCRO has been granted permission to carry over unexpected funds by the Appropriations Committee and the governor for this purpose for over 10 years. The Foster Care Review Office currently has 3 projects in progress with the Office of the CIO and additional 5 projects slated to begin later this fiscal year. If our funds are cut, this progress will be stopped. A list of the Foster Care Review Office's completed and planned IT projects is attached to the materials that I provided. The Foster Care Review Office works with the Office of the CIO for programming due to their expertise and familiarity with our data system, which keeps record of every child placed in out-of-home care. The Foster Care Review Office recently contracted IT work to create data dashboards on our website, where data on children in out-of-home care is available for stakeholders, including the legislature and the public, each quarter. This data is an important gauge for efficiencies and outcomes for children in out-of-home care, and is an example of our timely and efficient use of funds. The Foster Care Review Office requests that its funding be preserved at current levels. Nebraskans, including vulnerable children and youth in foster care, stakeholders of the child welfare system, policymakers, and taxpayers benefit from our work. We ask that you not cut corners when it comes to the lives of children in out-of-home care.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. I have a couple of questions, and one of them was, it's on the back of the page, you said a decrease in your general funds would cause a proportionate decrease in federal Title V funds.
For E funding.
So if you're a $500,000 decrease here, that will also be $500,000 in federal funds?
We receive a quarter of, so we receive half and then a proportionate amount based on the number of children in out-of-home care that we review. So it is about a quarter to every dollar that we receive.
Of federal funding?
Yes.
So the $500,000 would mean over $100,000 decrease in federal funding?
Yes. Probably.
And what Senator Erdeman's asked this question a lot. Were you contacted by the governor's fiscal office before they told you that you were going to have this cut?
No, sir.
No, you weren't. Thank you.
Other questions? I wanted to talk about your 24, 25, and 26 automation. How is this? We're going out 2 years already. You're saying those would also be affected by this cut?
It would. So our unexpended funds represents savings that we have accumulated over time. We've asked for our unexpended funds to let us push that funding forward into fiscal years. It represents over time the amount of money that we saved, and so that money being cut, once it's gone, it will be gone.
So do you have a price estimates for the 25 and 26 work.
I can get that to you.
But you're saying these funds would be needed at that time. You won't have savings in the next 2 fiscal years that could cover it.
I don't think so, sir.
And how is foster care review? We've always had issues with the child welfare system. Do you see improvements in child welfare, or how are you contributing to maybe reducing the problems that we have in child welfare?
Well, I believe that we report on the length of time in care that children spend in out-of-home care, the numbers of children in out-of-home care. I believe that those numbers have been sustained or are almost increasing. The numbers, also the number or the amount of time children spend in out-of-home care relatively is unchanged over time. I believe that these are important measures for the child welfare system, and it's one of the things that we track on our system independently from DHHS and report on our website, in our quarterly reports, in our annual reports to senators and to the public so that they know how child welfare is performing.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next agency is the Crime Commission. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senators, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Brian Tuma, BRYAN-TUMA, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Nebraska Commission on Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, which is commonly referred to as the Crime Commission. LB2 proposes to reduce the appropriated balance for Program 220, which is our community corrections programs, by $300,000. By not reobligating the funds to fiscal year 2024-25, there will be no disruption of efforts to administer the community corrections program. The agency has been working in a collaborative process to identify cost savings in all areas of the budget. Recently, the agency proposed $7.5 million in unexpended funds from fiscal year 2023-24 and $3 million from fiscal year 2024-25. A significant portion of those funds were derived from Program 199, which is the operating budget for the Nebraska Law Enforcement Training Center. There are multiple reasons for cost savings totaling nearly 1/3 of the agency's appropriated budget. Primary reasons include conservative spending for operational issues, staff vacancies, and less than anticipated expenses associated with the administration of the Law Enforcement Attraction and Retention Act, which addresses hiring bonuses for law enforcement officers and retention bonuses. Moreover, the agency examined all program areas for cost savings and identified funds that were not fully executed on due to staff vacancies or underutilization of funding by criminal justice partners. The agency does not anticipate an impact in services from these budget reductions. That concludes my testimony, and I'll certainly answer any questions you might have, and thank you for your consideration.
Are there questions? Just, when did you become the director of this agency?
June 12th of 2023.
All right. And have you made some changes that have created these savings?
Well, we had a considerable number of staff vacancies, and I kind of made this well known. We had some real issues around federal grants. We lost a lot of staff members. We had some other departures for a variety of reasons, retirement, other opportunities. Some folks left, I think, probably out of some concern about the federal grants and where they were at. So we've experienced all of that. I would say I had roughly 30 vacancies over the course of the last year at various times and for various reasons.
And law enforcement training is important to us. You think that is still going to be fully functional?
Yes, we had considerable savings in funds they just were not expended. The hiring bonuses, so we initiated those last year in 2023. So there are roughly 3,700, in excess of 3,700 law enforcement officers in the state. We had about 2,700 to 2,800 applications for those funds. So we saw a fair amount of underutilization of those dollars. Now, there are some folks left law enforcement for a variety of reasons, but there's still a number of those that did not apply that could apply. But we're just not seeing those applications come in. So we will start the second round, which is in year 3 of that program in 2025.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Thank you for being here. And you brought some to mind that I wanted to ask this. You talked about a lot of this saving is for the operating budget for the Nebraska Law Enforcement Training Center. Is that the one at Grand Island?
Yeah,
Or
yes.
what is your, are we having a lot of people come there for classes or for training? I mean, so they can become law officers, or are we seeing a downturn, or what? Talk about some of that once.
Well, I think all of you are fairly aware that there's been a significant issue with trying to hire law enforcement officers. It's probably one of the more critical issues that's impacting law enforcement. Having said that, we've seen the demand for training out the training center for the basic certification course, which is I call it the bulk of the activity out there. We've had in excess of, we can do 50 students for each 16-week training cycle. So we do 3 of those years. So our output, 150 officers a year. We've had a demand for, in some cases, considerably more number of officers than we can provide. So the Police Standards Advisory Council has looked at that issue. We're trying to take some short-term measures to address that that might help some agencies. But I can give you, for instance, Grand Island Police Department hired 8 individuals at one time. That's a real anomaly right now. We could only get 2 of their officers into the next training cycle. PSAC has limited agencies to two participants. If they have more than that from their agency, then they typically shift them over into the next training cycle. That's to avoid one agency, taking more slots. Smaller agencies, particularly in the, I'll call it greater Nebraska, won't be able to get their people in. And those agencies are probably even more impacted by staffing deficiencies than, say, a community like Grand Island. It's a big issue. So, yeah, the demand is still there.
So your classes are always full, and then you almost have a waiting list. So
Yes.
You don't have room on the back end to fill back in.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Vargas?
Thanks for being here. So we have federal programs with domestic violence. We have, crime victim reparation programs. Is this offset or reduction coming? How is it going to affect those
Right.
specific programs?
So the Victims of Crime Act, we call it the VOCA funds. We've seen a significant reduction from the federal folks for those dollars. Those are federal dollars, and primarily all of our grant staff are paid for out of federal dollars for the VOCA program. We have Bureau of Justice assistance, the Burn JAG dollars, which primarily go to law enforcement. Again, federal dollars, not a lot of state funds in play there. But the victim services, the crime victims reparations, we have a cash fund that provides, I'll call it the resource for us to address those issues. And that's not touched by any of this. So I don't see any impact on that program whatsoever.
And that includes domestic violence programs, right? That's
Yes,
not gonna be-
and so, yeah, domestic violence programs, again, those are paid for out of the VOCA grant. We have some concerns with what they put a cap on the amount of money available in that grant. It's like a large cash fund at the federal level. They've seen reductions in the amount of money coming into that cash fund. So they have, Congress has placed a cap on how much money can be expended out of there. So at one point, we had 13 people working just on VOCA grants in the agency. We took a 40% reduction in 1 year. And now they're poised to maybe hit us another 40%. So we have some real concerns around that. So we were taking steps internally to really reduce our operational costs. In case that occurred, we would at least have some general fund dollars perhaps we could apply to some of those programs.
And I'm asking because that's my concern. I'm hearing a lot of rural reliance on federal grant money, which is still taxpayer money. And if dramatic changes happen and it affects these programs, and you're now saying, well, we can reduce by 7.5 million, we're losing out on general funds that can actually fund these programs like they should be from our state general fund budget. And I am concerned that we're going to see a reduction in some of these federal program funds in the following years. Regardless of what administration is there. So that being the case, then shouldn't we be holding on to these funds to make sure that we can fund the basic services in case the federal government doesn't come through and actually cut services?
Yeah. So our $7.5 million, most of that came out of the operating costs for the training center.
Okay.
So that was last fiscal year's funding. We will get new funding in this current fiscal year. But with respect to the victims programs, there's no reduction in the CBR program whatsoever. So crime victim reparations issues are being addressed just like they have been. We feel I would say we're comfortable with the amount of resource we have available to us for that program. The other programs, I think we have to monitor very carefully with the federal dollars available. And one program would be the sexual assault survivors program. We have a state statute says that no victim of a sexual assault is going to incur the costs of the examination, the rape kit, and the laboratory fees. So we're watching that one really close. Of course, no one can really predict how much money we need for that program any 1 year because it varies. But we are using state dollars that you folks appropriate for that program, and we match that up against the available federal dollars. So we watch that one very close.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
No, we'll talk later. The next agency we have is Turk.
Good afternoon, Chairman
Welcome.
Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Rob Hotz, ROB-HOTZ. I'm the chairman of the Tax Equalization and Review Commission. Thank you for your long day of service today, and hopefully we won't extend it too far. I've submitted to you a letter. The commission, LB 814's general fund budget for the commission was about $1 million. The LB2 would propose reducing that LB 814 $1 million budget by $100,000 for 24-25. And we had a reappropriation of a little over $300,000. Part of that was vacancy savings. We had a fourth commissioner added to the commission by way of LB 243 in 2023. That commissioner took office sometime during the year. And so we did have some vacancy savings on that. The commission for this current year, 24-25, could live with both the reappropriation reduction and the general fund reduction. However, there would be some concern we have that in prior years, we've probably spent about 80% of our general fund appropriation, but and it will reappropriate in the mid biennium and then would lapse at the end of the biennium. Our concern at this point, and we have some preference, I guess, that general fund, $100,000 perhaps not be reduced because we went from 3 commissioners to 4 commissioners. We have 1 lawyer on staff and 4 staff members. Otherwise, we get about 1,500 appeals per year. To have the flexibility to hire a second attorney, which we've had in the past, may be needed. We're still watching closely how well we can handle the caseload, having that 4th commissioner. The 4th commissioner was a non-lawyer, so we have 2 lawyers and 2 non-lawyers, 1 lawyer to service the 4, whereas previously it was 1 lawyer to service 3. 2 of them were attorneys. So the demand and the workload for that 1 lawyer, I anticipate may become such that we need to have that flexibility to hire a second lawyer. So there's some caution. We can make it through this year because of the reappropriation remaining for the current fiscal year, but we wouldn't be able to plan on next year having that $100,000 in the general fund. We wouldn't be able to make that hire this year and knowing that the money would be available general fund next year as well, if it's the same baseline. So there's some concern. We might be able to make it work still. We usually seem to spend well below what we're appropriated, but there is some concern there. There's a lot of concern about property taxes at this point, and part of the concern is the angst that people have in getting their property valuation appeals handled appropriately and timely, and we want to be part of that solution and not part of a problem with that. Any questions you may have, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Senator Vargas?
Thank you for being here. Will you talk a little bit, you just, obviously this is meant to deal with property tax appeals or valuation appeals. Will you talk to me a little bit about the current state of what people are bringing in terms of their issues with valuations? We hear on one side, on many sides, but one argument is that valuations are not the problem, but it sounds like valuations are a problem, which is why people are utilizing Turk to try to address concerns. So just tell me about the current state of, what people are sharing,
What we hear, Senator Vargas, is almost universally that the reason people come in and challenge the valuation is because they feel like that's the only way they can lower their property tax. They're not accessing effectively the local levy authorities and their budget meetings and those kinds of proceedings. And so it's a one at a time effort by each taxpayer. I don't think any taxpayer wants government to lower the value of their property or for any purpose, to have the value of their property lowered, other than to, because of the multiplying the value times the levy. That's the only way they know of or feel like they can lower their property tax.
Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for coming. So when you speak of hiring another lawyer, you say you have 2 on the commission. You're talking about a lawyer to advise the commission? Is that what you're thinking?
Traditionally, we've had 1 or 2 lawyers on the staff who assist the commission in all the things that the commission does. The primary duty is getting orders written, and there's a draft process that the commissioner is involved in each order, or go back and forth and get the order prepared and so on. There's statewide equalization that involves a lot of legal work. And every day, I call it putting out fires. It's every day we have motions that come in for continuance, motions to dismiss, questions that come from taxpayers and lawyers representing taxpayers. We need to have at least 1 lawyer on staff. I think we're pushing close to where we may need to, again, like we have had in the past.
It seems peculiar when you add a commissioner, then you may have to add another lawyer that you'd be able to forego extra funding or giving this appropriations back. That's kind of strange.
Adding a commissioner and reducing the funding to make it work. Like I said, we've been living below our budget for some time. It'll be a lot closer now.
Are you considering not having remote hearings like Scottsbluff, North Platte?
We by statute, and to be honest with you, by practicality, we still have not found, with all of the technology available, a system that's flawless. You have an evidentiary proceeding and you missed 15 seconds, your record is not good. There's something that occurred there that didn't get recorded, that's not part of the record, that was testified to, and you can't account for it. That's a problem from a due process and full and fair hearing point of view. We've not found, including Zoom and other technological advances, something that's flawless that would be. Also, there are a lot of mom and pops in commercial and a lot of folks who don't have, including some counties that don't have the technology where both the audio and the video are at the level they need to be able to have that kind of a hearing.
So-
We do a lot of hearings, statewide equalization, we do using Zoom. It's not an evidentiary proceeding in the same way that a appeal hearing is. And we do a fair amount of phone hearings for show cause proceedings regarding jurisdiction. We haven't reached the point yet where I think we can step into doing that. We travel out to Scottsbluff, North Platte, Broken Bow, Norfolk, other places.
So is your fourth commissioner helping you catch up?
Yes. We've set some benchmarks starting about a year and a half ago. We're watching those benchmarks. We're tracking that. We're trying to aim at the right target.
So what would be the average time if someone files a complaint or issue before they have a hearing?
Right now, it's the same as it's been always, that for tax year 2024, the effective date is January 1. Taxpayer gets notice of the assessment in June, files a protest at the county level, gets a response in July or August, files an appeal with the commission between July and September, August, September. Even if you were in the front of the line, you're already 9 months past the effective date. If we put everybody in that line for that year and we'd been completely caught up, still the last person in that line for 2024, if you got done in a year, wouldn't have their hearing until a year and 9 months after the effective date of 2024.
Is a goal to catch up so that I have my hearing the same year before I pay my taxes the next time?
Even if we, like I just said, I don't think that's a realistic goal. I'd like it to be. But if we put everybody in the line for 2024 and no one was in line before the start, and you had your first hearing in September of 2024, you'd get done after everyone's already paid their 24 taxes, both installments, late 25.
So even with 4 commissioners?
Well, that's the way the law is. The protest notice, or the notice of evaluation, is June of that tax year. The protest hearings, and they file the appeals. We get the first one scheduled, even if we got the first one scheduled yet that calendar year, the last one for that year wouldn't be done for, if you can get a year's worth done in 1 year. I don't know exactly. There are so many variables and so many balls in the air every year, and frankly, every week, that's hard to predict with great accuracy.
So you may know the answer to this or may not, but when we used to use the court system, was there that much of a delay?
I believe it was because the district courts used to do all of the appeals, and there were, couldn't tell you the number, dozens and dozens of district court judges. And from what I recall of the history on that was that district court judges tended to put them at the back of the line because it was just a niche that they weren't as familiar with. And there was a lot of difficulty, and
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Anyone else?
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
That will conclude the, it'll be 2 items. And we'll go on with any other agencies that would like to testify. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and my testimony says good morning, so I apologize that it has not been updated to afternoon. Members of the Appropriation Committee, my name is Corey Steele, Coreysteel. I am a state court administrator for the Nebraska Judicial Branch. I am testifying today in opposition to provisions of LB3 that allow interest accrued to be transferred to the general fund from all of the 14 cash funds administered by the judicial branch. And we have, as I said, 14 different cash funds within the judicial branch. As a separate branch of government under Article 2, Section 1 of the Nebraska Constitution, the judicial branch administers the courts and the probation as directed by the Nebraska Supreme Court and the Administrative Office of the Courts and Probation. Therefore, the judicial branch cash funds were created for judicial branch purposes. All fund assets, including interest, should be retained within the judicial branch and used to further the statutory purposes of each fund. Those purposes include the Supreme Court's constitutional duty to regulate the practice of law through funds such as a Bar Commission cash fund and the Council for Discipline cash fund. Other judicial branch cash funds allow probationers to pay for services that improve their lives, conflicts to be settled through the mediation centers, and parents to work together to the best plan for their children's well-being and much more. Statutes governing judicial branch cash funds state the state court administrator shall administer the funds and that the funds shall only be used for its stated purposes. It is reasonable that the statutory intent is that the judicial branch is in control of the cash fund revenue from any source. In addition, keeping the accrued interest within the cash fund, it improves the sustainability of the cash fund and the programs it supports, reduces the pressure to increase court fees that are paid for by the citizens and litigants that come in front of the court, reduces the pressure to increase attorney licensure dues and bar exam fees for law students that are going to be taking the bar exam, and reduces the need to request funding for these programs through general fund appropriation. In conclusion, you may recall that this committee agreed with Chief Justice Heavican earlier this year that the judicial branch funds are under the authority of the Supreme Court. Specifically, LB 1413 did not include a transfer from the probation cash fund that was originally placed in that bill to the general fund. The same principle applies to LB3. Revenue, including interest credited to all of our cash funds, should remain there. I'd be happy to provide the committee with language necessary to make this happen, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have today.
Are there questions? Just to clarify, you do rely on the interest earnings, you're saying, to fund some of the functions of these funds?
Correct. I'll give you an example. In one of our cash funds, the dispute resolution cash fund, we utilize that fund to pay for mediation services that take through the mediation center. So we fund all of the mediation centers for the mediations they do and the child custody disputes and what have you. That fund goes down and drops almost to zero each year because we try to maximize and give the mediation centers almost all the dollars that we have in order to do those mediations. That continually increases each year, and we try to support those mediation centers by utilizing all those funds. So even the interest in those funds, we try to give out to those mediation centers because, quite frankly, they haven't received any new increase in their service cost in quite some time, probably 10 years or so.
Very good. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is unusual. I've never done this before, but I thought it was worth it. My name is Michaela Kavanaugh, Machaela Cavanaugh, representing District 6 and the Nebraska Legislature. I am here to testify in opposition to LB 2 and 3. I primarily came up here today to testify in opposition to LB 2 as a member of the legislature, cutting funding of the legislature. I fundamentally disagree with those cuts in this bill. I think it is outrageous for us to think that we've been overspending by $7 million. Why would we have ever appropriated that money in the first place if we had room to cut $7 million? That does not even seem to make any sense whatsoever. Also, the bill does not outline where we are cutting $7 million from, which is additionally concerning. There are many things in these bills that are concerning, but the handout that is being given to all of you, members of the Appropriation Committee, is a copy of emails that my office had got from requesting about budget cuts. These emails are sent from Lee Will, from the governor's office, to every agency, code agency head on April 6th, before we passed our budget. They were planning this before we passed our budget. And now we are here with these budget cuts reflected in these bills. Why? Why did they not come to you, Senator Clements, chair of this committee, when you were drafting the budget and ask for these cuts to be reflected in the budget that we passed? Why are we here wasting our time and our money to have a special session, rearranging everyone's lives, for budget cuts that they had planned in April, in concert with the consultant Epiphany? I have requested numerous documents from numerous state agencies. And as those documents come forward, I will share them with the legislature. I will put together all of the information that my office has gathered and give it to everyone in the legislature, hopefully in time for floor debate on these two bills, because I have no wish or prayer. I do have a wish, but no prayer of you all not voting this to the floor, which is extremely unfortunate because this is a complete disregard for our government. This should not be happening. Separation of powers for the courts, separation of powers for the legislature. What this does is unconstitutional. LB3 gives the authority to set fees to state agencies and takes that authority away from ourselves. We are giving our authority, our duty, to the governor's office in these bills. Were you even aware of that? I know you don't have to answer. I thought it was important enough to bring all of this up prior to floor debate because it is so egregious. These bills are a slap in the face to the legislature and to the people of Nebraska and to all of the branches of government. And I know you have heard today from the non-code agencies how they found out about their budget cuts was when the bill was introduced. Because as you can see in Mr. Will's email to Kristen Cox and Dave Lopez and Jonathan Combie on April 6th at 7:50 p.m., emails below have been sent framing the governor's goals for savings. Non-code agencies will have to factor into the equation to get to the targets. Don't know how the heavy hitters will be treated like state colleges, universities, etc. Now we know. So I hope you will reconsider this. I hope you will not vote this to the floor. At the bare minimum, I hope you will have enough respect for the people sitting at this table with you who work for the legislature not to cut our budget by $7 million. That's all I've got.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see any questions.
I did have a question, actually.
All right, proceed. We're intending to have representatives of state agencies continue before we had other comments, but while she's here, go ahead.
Are there other documents like this in regards to the public record request that you have requested that we haven't yet seen?
Yes.
Okay. Will you make sure to share those with us
Oh,
as well?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
The $200 million that are being cut from HHS, the money that's being cut from child welfare, when we seem to have forgotten that we took an underbid of St. Francis Ministries and then had to have a special investigative oversight committee to undo that debacle where children actually died. And now we're sitting here talking about cutting $40 million from child welfare. Yeah, I'll make sure you get the documents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Bronkhorst, spelled Kelly Brunkhorst, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Nebraska Corn Board. Simply put, Section 12 of LB3 would annually transfer $300,000 from Nebraska's corn checkoff program, a proposal that our board strongly opposes. Funding that would not be available for strategic programs in the areas of market development, research, promotion, and education. In 1978, the legislature established the Nebraska Corn Board to administer Nebraska's corn checkoff program. The legislation provided for a board of directors that, among other things, would have the duties and responsibilities to authorize the expenditure of funds and contracting of expenditures to conduct proper activities of the program. In bypassing the board of directors' authority, it goes against the legislation that an earlier legislature approved and sets a bad precedence for transfers in the future. To provide some historical reference, in 2009, the Governor Heinemann proposed a sweep fund from various state corn checkoff programs to close a revenue shortfall. Coincidentally, that was during a special session also. Corn growers walked the hallways, meeting with senators to explain the value of the investment that they make in checkoff programs and how that is completely different than taxes they pay for general funded programs. Ag and elevator associations testified in opposition to such a proposal that was ultimately not part of the final package, an outcome that we would also ask that you take. You note that I did not reference the program in which the funds would be transferred into the agri-ability program. I'm not here to debate the merits of the program, but will say that the state of Nebraska provides various programs and tax credits towards expansion of our business base or employment. The agri-ability program provides assistance to keep a disabled farmer employed in the operation or facilitate their incorporation into an agricultural operation. I believe this should be worthy of the general funds that support these programs, just like it does other incentive programs. I know your time is valuable, and so I will end my testimony here and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. What happened in 2009 when Heinemann tried to take your money?
So ultimately, it was not part of a final package. Senator Dubas then also introduced a bill to strike that section. I found out this morning that Senator Ibaugh has dropped a bill or amendment, to strike Section 12 of LB3 also.
So the money that's in the checkoff was put there by corn growers who pay a checkoff when they sell their corn, correct?
Correct.
How is it possible that the governor thinks that's his money? That's rhetorical.
It is a rhetorical question.
I'm in agreement with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I'd like to call on the mid-center people. Next.
Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Chris Cradaville, CHRIS-KRATOCHVIL. I'm appearing today on behalf of the NU system in oppositional to the removal of the Biomedical Research Fund as proposed in LB2. I currently serve as the interim vice president for external relations for the University of Nebraska system. But for the past 25 years, I've worked as a clinical researcher and research lead at University of Nebraska Medical Center. In that role, I've had a front row seat to the vision, to the fortitude, and the excellence our state leaders have demonstrated in developing and maintaining the biomedical research funding of the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Reserve. This funding is not just a financial resource, but it truly is a cornerstone of our state's health, economic viability, and scientific progress. In 2001, the Nebraska Legislature passed LB 692 and boldly established the Health the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund with a clear and visionary purpose to ensure the fund's sustainability, reflecting the legislature's commitment to long-term health and economic benefits for the state. Their foresight has led to 2 decades of research, innovation, and life-saving breakthroughs. The intent of the legislature was clear: to create a lasting positive impact on Nebraska's health landscape and economy. Not only have these dollars supported biomedical research, but they've allowed recruitment and retention of nationally excelling researchers and their teams, advancing healthcare for Nebraskans and dramatically impacting economic development. These funds have supported breakthroughs in heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, dementia, and multitude of other medical challenges, challenge well known to all Nebraskan families. And numerous entities have leveraged these critical investments from the state, including University of Nebraska-Lincoln, University of Nebraska at Omaha, University of Nebraska at Kearney, University of Nebraska Medical Center, Creighton University, and Boys Town. UNMC alone has used its funding to support the recruitment or retention of 286 researchers, contributed to a more than 4-fold growth in extramural research grants and contracts from $40 million in 2000 to $173.4 million in 2023 at UNMC alone. Through top-tier biomedical research faculty, we built our research infrastructure and increased our competitiveness for federal funding. Investments in major equipment, facility renovations, and critical research programs make our institutions more competitive on a national scale. And losing this funding mechanism would dramatically affect current and future recruits, including those to which dollars have already been committed. It's also important to clarify that the recently enacted LB 1087 provider assessment funding, though critically important to the hospital collaborators, is not a revenue source that UNMC or other campuses can use for alternative fundings to replace these appropriations. As proud partners of the state, we work to improve the health outcomes of all Nebraskans. And this funding is not only an investment in research, but an investment in the future health and prosperity of all Nebraskans. I respectfully ask this committee to reinstate these critically important funds. The work you and your colleagues are doing during the special session is important, and we thank you for your service. I'm confident you don't hear that enough, and I really do want to express my gratitude. With that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here. On that last page there, you commented, it's important to clarify that the recently enacted LB 1087 provider assessment funding, which is critically important for hospitals, is not in any way a revenue source UNMC or other campuses can use for alternative funding to replace any current or future appropriations. Because we have been, or at least I have, been kind of told that you're getting all that money, now you can use part of that money. So could you clarify that or explain that or better, give us a better understanding of that?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question, Senator, because I think that really is a critical question, because clearly there was a large bolus of funding that was made available to the clinical partners across the state. And that's critically important funding because that's helping address a gap, the delta between the cost of providing care for Medicaid and what Medicaid funds. So part of it is filling that gap. So a lot of that funds goes to operational costs, but it's also going to expand some of the capacity. So the hospitals have set up an agreement with CMS of what they'll be delivering. And in conversations with state leadership, that's going to include an expansion of maternal care, behavioral health, and things like that. So that's one aspect of how those funds are being used. But another really critical aspect is these are funds that are separate from the University of Nebraska Medical Center, for example. These are funds that went to Nebraska Medicine. So those are funds going to the clinical enterprise, which is a separate corporation. So UNMC would not have direct access to those funds. Neither would University of Nebraska Lincoln, University of Nebraska at Omaha, University of Nebraska Kearney. Similarly, the funds that went to CHI, which operates the hospital operations that Creighton utilizes, Creighton wouldn't have access to those funds that are provided to CHI. So I think those are two important aspects that hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Thank you, Doctor.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank
Senator
you. Thank you for
Armendariz.
being here.
Certainly.
I was just trying to figure out, huge fan of 1087. It was my priority bill, more than needed for our hospitals across the state.
Yes.
So I know it filled a delta of what the gap was for Medicaid with all of those hospitals. So where is the $15 million being distributed? Are you saying that $15 million is going directly to universities like Creighton, UNL, UNO?
Yeah, yes,
Not
exactly.
going to UNMC, not going to CHI, not going to Boys Town?
Well, so the $15 million comes from the healthcare cash fund, and it's divided up amongst the universities. So it goes to University of Nebraska Medical Center, but not Nebraska Medicine, which is a separate entity. It goes to University of Nebraska Lincoln, Omaha Kearney. It goes to Creighton University. It goes to Boys Town. So it's really separate from the clinical operations. And where this is really important is this has been a way that we could leverage bringing in world-class researchers coming into the academic side. And certainly there's some overlap with the clinical piece, but they really are separate. And it's not only the recruitment of these individuals, but also the retention of these individuals. As you can imagine, as we're growing these rock star researchers that are bringing in massive federal grants and really earth-shattering breakthroughs, they're getting recruited everywhere. So those funds can also be used to help retain them and also for some of the critical infrastructure to support their needs while they're here. But this 15 million really is going to the academic enterprise, not the clinical enterprise.
So there is no overlap in who's receiving the 1087 bill funds and the $15 million funds.
So the 1087 is going to the clinical enterprise, so Nebraska Medicine, things like that. And the healthcare cash fund is going to the academic enterprise like UNMC, University Systems, Creighton, Boys Town.
So the only place where people might get confused is UNMC, University.
Yeah, so
overlap,
it is,
Nebraska Medicine.
you're exactly right. That's a very complex relationship because Nebraska Medicine is the clinical enterprise. It's a separate corporation from UNMC, although faculty may go over there and we share a campus for part of our care.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
A few more of us.
We want representatives from the agency like to work for the University of Nebraska.
That's us.
That's them.
Is that who you are? Who are you
I'm a
with?
state agency.
Let's have him next. Yes.
I'd like to go back to work.
Yes.
Yeah,
Your turn.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is Tyler Coates. I'm the director for the Nebraska Real Property Appraiser Board. Thank you, Senator Clements and committee members for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Real Property Appraiser Board on LB3. Just some brief background, the board was established in 1991 to carry out the requirements of Title 11 of the Federal Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989 and the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council Appraisal Subcommittee. The board is statutorily charged with administering the Real Property Appraiser Act and Appraisal Management Company Registration Act. The board's programs are funded by fees collected from real property appraisers, appraisal management companies, and education providers that offer appraisal education. There's no taxpayer money used to support any of these programs. Section 40 in LB3 redirects to the general fund income received for investments made utilizing monies from cash funds. The redirection of investment income would eliminate approximately $21,000 in revenue each year for the board. The board strives to provide the most efficient and effective service possible while maintaining fiscal responsibility. Things that the board does is technology enhancements to better automate processes, staff duty evaluations, and reassigning based on workflow and workload, streamlining processes and procedures. Due to the board's success, in the past evaluating these processes and business functions, fees have not been increased for 13 years. Although the board continues to take a measured approach to budget management, a point has come where the fees must increase to keep pace with cost. And the board is in the process of implementing a fee schedule to increase revenue slowly over the next 4 years based on real property appraiser and AMC count projections, projected revenues, and projected expenditures. The board fully intends to carry this plan as far into the future as it can before another adjustment to the statutory fee limit is required. As previously mentioned, redirecting the investment income would remove approximately $21,000 in revenue. That's significant to the board because our typical revenues are between $350,000 and $400,000. So not what you've heard from previous agencies before, but to us, that's a big deal. Redirecting these revenues negatively impacts the plan being executed by the board. The projected revenues would no longer meet our projected expenditures that we're trying to put together. In addition, Section 40 in LB3 removes the board's revenue earned because of fees paid by Nebraska real property appraisers and registered AMCs from being used to support those programs of those who paid those fees. If Section 40 and LB3 remains as it is, LB3 is passed, the board would be forced to make up those lost revenues through additional fee increases. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Questions? Seeing none.
Senator Clemens.
Oh, excuse me.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. So the question is, have you been contacted before they tried to take this money? Did
No.
they have a discussion?
No.
So all this money put in there by fees, no tax dollars.
No tax dollars, no.
Sounds similar to the corn checkoff. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, Workers' Compensation Court here. Let's go with you next.
Good afternoon, members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Jill Schroeder. I'm the administrator of the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. On behalf of the court, I'm testifying in opposition to LB3, Section 40, which is the interest reallocation provision. The Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court is a judicial branch entity in follow-up to what Mr. Steele said, created pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution, and as well as Article 5 of the Constitution and Section 48(1)52. The Compensation Court Cash Fund is a special purpose fund that exists to aid in providing for the expenses of administering the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Act and the payment of the salaries and expenses of the personnel of the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. Approximately 97% of the court's revenue comes from assessments against insurers, self-insured employers who are approved by the court, and risk management pools. The remaining 3% includes application fees for self-insurance, for managed care entities, for settlements, which is a small amount, as well as the interest that we're talking about here. The Workers' Compensation Court is tasked with administering the Compensation Court Cash Fund and should be able to continue to administer that judicial branch fund in its entirety. The Compensation Court Cash Fund has a provision that is different from some of the other cash funds. It's intended to be self-regulating, and the provision that I'm talking about is an abatement provision. So if, as of June 30th of each year, the amount in the cash fund exceeds the 3 times the expenses and encumbrances from that year, then next year, the insurers, self-insured employers, and risk management pools have an abatement. They do not have to contribute for the following year. I think that is an important provision, and it does self-regulate, because instead of our cash fund going up and up and up, when it reaches that level, then there's an abatement and it resets essentially. I think that is different in response to some of the previous testifiers. This is not taxpayer money. This is all from the entities that I've described: insurance companies, workers' compensation insurance companies, self-insured employers, and risk management pools. The court's programs would be impacted by the interest sweep that is being proposed. The court's statutory duties, for example, include enforcement actions and collections of monetary penalties against employers who fail to procure workers' compensation insurance. In situations where there is that failure to procure workers' compensation insurance, our court provides information to the Attorney General. They pursue penalties, and those penalties do become a part of the common school funds. Last year that amounted, or the fiscal year that just ended, that amounted to $152,000 and a little bit more. So as a judicial branch court, because of the special purpose of the compensation court cash fund, and because of the abatement procedure, we are asking that you exclude the compensation court cash fund from that interest allocation sweep, if that indeed moves forward as Section 40 of LB3. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Seeing none,
Thank you very
your
much for your
testimony.
time.
Have you decided who's next? Would you like to go? Could I have raise your hand if you're planning to testify, please? All right. And we're going to be, okay, after these, we're going to be asking if there's any other agency representatives, but
Okay.
welcome.
Great. So I'm going to continue the story on biomedical research. Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Julianne Strauss-Sokup, spelled Julianne-Strauss-Soukup. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Research and Scholarship at Creighton University. I'm here today to continue the story that we started to hear about highlighting how the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund promotes brain gain and attracts high caliber scientific researchers and projects to our state. Creighton University understands the importance and value of building Nebraska's workforce. With 80% of our students coming from outside the state and nearly half of those deciding to stay in the state after graduation, we are committed to recruiting and retaining exceptional people. These funds are a magnet for top talent, providing early career faculty essential support to collect preliminary data that then strengthens their federal funding proposals. Additionally, they enable faculty to hire technicians, research associates, graduate and undergraduate students, boosting high job opportunities in science across our state, from Chadron State College all the way to Wayne State College. By investing in biomedical research, we are investing in Nebraska's future. These funds create high-quality jobs, stimulate economic growth, and enhance our state's reputation as a leader in scientific innovation. Competition for top researchers is fierce. While outstanding candidates receive offers nationwide, the support and stability of this fund makes Nebraska a more compelling choice. And when we recruit new faculty, they frequently arrive with a spouse and family, further enhancing our state's health and economy. This fund also empowers us to equip our research facilities with state-of-the-art technology. For an example, an instrument for sequencing entire genomes or rare cancer-causing genes which can cost over $1 million, is essential for discovering cures. Without these funds, we risk losing both these critical tools and the talent needed to use them. Since it began in 2001, this fund has helped recruit 72 faculty researchers to Creighton University. And today, this funding actively supports over 20 Creighton researchers who are developing new cancer treatments, safeguarding our food supply by studying neurological diseases in livestock, and advancing critical research in antibiotic resistance, asthma, and hearing loss. Simply put, this funding is a catalyst for innovation and growth in Nebraska and should be maintained. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I think we had a comment that Creighton has a hospital. Will it be benefiting from the hospital assessment program? And could those funds be used for your research?
So similar to the Nebraska system, CHI, Common Spirit, is separate from Creighton University academic institution. So no, those other funds would not be able to be used for biomedical research.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Ryan McCreary. It's spelled RyanMCCREERY, and I'm the Vice President of Research for Boys Town. At Boys Town, we're changing the way that America cares for children and families, and our research programs that are partially supported by the tobacco settlement funds from the Healthcare Cash Fund are a crucial component of our mission. Our scientists focus on research that helps to improve the lives of children and families with hearing and communication disorders, neurodevelopmental conditions, and mental health conditions. I'm here today to highlight the importance of biomedical research as a significant economic engine that created hundreds of high-paying jobs across Nebraska over the last 20 years. Tobacco settlement funds have provided fuel for that engine in the form of financial support for improving infrastructure and recruiting top scientists at Boys Town, Creighton University, and the University of Nebraska system. Scientists who were recruited and initially supported by investments from the tobacco settlement funds have been highly successful in obtaining federal funding to support their research. Since the settlement funds were initially allocated for biomedical research by the legislature in 2001, our partner institutions have all experienced substantial growth in external federal funding. At Boys Town, for example, our federal funding for research in 2001 was about $4 million annually, and in 2023, that rose to $23 million. This is a return on investment of about $10 for every dollar that we spent from the Healthcare Cash Fund at Boys Town alone, and you heard from our partner institutions the impact that it's had on them as well. These research dollars stay in our communities. Competitively awarded funding to Nebraska scientists strengthens our state economy by creating highly skilled jobs and attracting talented workers to our communities. Without these funds, Nebraska's leading research institutions would lose a critical competitive advantage that we have enjoyed for the last 2 decades. Tobacco settlement funds often provide multi-year commitments to recruit and retain top scientists. The proposal to eliminate $15 million in biomedical research funding from the Healthcare Cash Fund would stifle progress in key areas of research that are currently working at our institutions, including improving care for Nebraskans with cancer, mental health disorders, childhood neurological and developmental conditions, speech and language and communication disorders, and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. We can only continue to grow Nebraska's scientific economy and positive impact in our communities with your continued support. I appreciate the opportunity to highlight the importance of biomedical research with you today, and I really appreciate you taking time during this special session to hear from us. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Saying none, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Joanne B. Sweezy, spelled Joannbsweasy. I have the privilege of being the director of the Fred and Pamela Buffett Cancer Center, the only cancer center in Nebraska that is designated by the National Cancer Institute, and one of only 72 in the entire nation. I'm here today to highlight the importance of the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund for the support of cancer research in the state of Nebraska and oppose any reduction. In terms of cancer, Nebraska has big challenges. We have higher rates of cancer compared to the United States. More Nebraskans die of brain, colorectal, kidney, leukemia, pancreas, and esophageal cancers. Many Nebraskans in rural and frontier areas of our state don't have sufficient access to cancer screening and cancer care. Members of the Buffett Cancer Center are some of the best researchers in our nation and have led the way in blood cancer research and early detection of pancreas cancer, to name a few. And many of these scientists have been supported by the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund. For example, one of the newest cancer therapies is called chimeric antigen CAR T-cell therapy. This is a way to get immune cells called T cells, a type of white blood cell, to fight cancer by changing them in the lab so that they can find and destroy cancer cells. The Fred and Pamela Buffett Cancer Center was one of the first cancer centers asked to test this therapy in patients because our researchers are internationally recognized as world-class experts in blood cancers. Largely due to the research performed by our team, CAR T-cell therapy is broadly used across the world today, saving many lives from cancer. The Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund helped to recruit and retain these researchers who could have gone to any cancer center in the world to do research and care for patients. A second example is that recently, researchers at our center invented a new drug that protects normal tissues from radiation therapy, but allows the radiation to kill the tumor. This means that patients whose cancer is successfully treated by radiation will not suffer from the toxic effects of this treatment. Investments in the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund supported the recruitment of these researchers as well. We have significant opportunities to prevent cancer, discover new treatments that are less toxic through cutting-edge research, and to increase access to care across the state so that all Nebraskans can participate in a clinical trial should they wish to do so. We will be successful only if we are able to continue to recruit the top experts from across the nation using the dollars provided by the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund. Significant investments are needed to recruit these experts. I'll give you one last example. Over 40% of cancer is preventable, and it's significantly better and less costly to families and to the state to prevent rather than to treat cancer. We are currently recruiting researchers who will develop new agents to prevent cancer, including cancer vaccines. It costs about $2 million to recruit just one of these experts to Nebraska, who will help us to prevent cancer across the state. Again, we have incredible opportunities in our state to prevent and treat cancer through cutting-edge research. We need the support of the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund to continue to pursue these opportunities. I thank you for all you do, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Next. We have another one on the biomedical topic.
Chairman Clemens, members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Andy Hale, ANDYHALE, and I am Vice President of Advocacy and Member Engagement for the Nebraska Hospital Association. And I'm here today to testify in opposition to LB2, specifically the issue concerning the $15 million being removed from the Healthcare Cash Fund for biomedical research. I think my colleagues before have outlined the issue. Probably should have handed this to you. Thank you. And I just wanted to highlight the NHA's primary concern is with the proposed budget bill is the suggestion in the budget narrative that institutions receiving the biomedical research funds use LB 1087s to fund biomedical research. To be clear, that would be a misuse of those federal funds. LB 1087, the federal funds that it leverages for protecting and strengthening access to care and quality of care in our Medicaid program. That is why CMS approves these programs. The intended purpose includes reducing the perpetual losses the Medicaid program creates for Nebraska hospitals. Suggesting to use these funds for any non-Medicaid purpose does not align with the federal guidelines for state Medicaid directed payment programs. There are a few other key points to the committee that needs to keep in mind. First, Nebraska's preprint application for the program remains under review at CMS, and it will be several more months before we have certainty about the approval of the state's directed payment program. Secondly, 55% of Nebraska's rural hospitals are losing money in operations, and nearly 40 hospitals have closed at least one service line in the past 2 years. These include labor and delivery, nursing homes, home health, hospice, and behavioral health. LB 1087 funds are needed to ensure these closures stop in rural Nebraska, and those services are there for Medicaid recipients and all Nebraskans. Lastly, Governor Pillen made his priorities clear with us on the negotiations of LB 1087. He asks our hospitals to step forward with these new investments in behavioral health, maternal care, senior care, and workforce, all investments that are important for Medicaid and for rural Nebraska. That was spelled out in LB 1087. Our hospitals are currently making plans to make these investments in a financially sustainable way, and some have even taken action on these steps. Our big question is, will this funding continue to be there to support these new service lines that the governor has asked us to move forward on, or will there be future attempts to divert this fund? For those reasons, we oppose this section of LB2, and I do want to thank the legislature and specifically members of this committee for LB 1087, specifically as Senator Armendariz mentioned. It was our priority bill. We are so looking forward to the implementation and the approval from CMS so we can get moving forward and do what we need to do. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here on the biomedical issue? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Heath Mello, that's Heathmello, and I serve as President and CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber. On behalf of our nearly 3,000 members, I'm here today expressing our opposition to portions of LB2 that seeks to defund the state's biomedical research, which funds the University of Nebraska system campuses, Creighton University, and Boys Town from the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund. The economic impact of biomedical research funding on the Greater Omaha region and the entire state of Nebraska cannot be overstated. State funding for biomedical research is not just an investment in scientific advancement. It's a crucial economic driver that attracts substantial federal research funding and top-tier researchers to our state. This funding forms the backbone of a robust research ecosystem that generates high-paying jobs, fosters innovation, and supports a wide-ranging support of local businesses. The institutions targeted by this bill collectively secure hundreds of millions of dollars in federal research grants annually. For instance, the University of Nebraska Medical Center alone attracts significant federal funding, including grants from the National Institutes of Health, that are known as NIH, and other federal agencies. This influx of federal dollars not only supports groundbreaking medical research, but also creates high-quality jobs for researchers, technicians, and administrative staff. These jobs, in turn, support local businesses from housing to retail, professional services, and thereby stimulating the broader Nebraska economy. Moreover, the research undertaken by all of these institutions addresses critical health challenges, leading to improved health outcomes for Nebraskans. This, in turn, reduces healthcare costs and enhances productivity, contributing to a healthier, more vibrant workforce. The benefits of such research extend far beyond our state borders, enhancing Nebraska's reputation as a leader in medical innovation in public health. In conclusion, state biomedical research funding is an essential investment in our economic future. It attracts federal dollars, supports high-quality jobs, fosters innovation, and improves public health. I urge you to oppose the portion of LB2 that defunds state biomedical research funding from the Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund and significantly impacts our state's innovation-based economic development. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else here on the biomedical issue? Seeing none, next, front row here. And as you're planning to testify, please move to the front chairs. Oh, yes. The public testimony, we're limiting to 3 minutes. And so, welcome.
Good, I will fly. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Michael Dwyer, Micheal, and I'm here to testify in opposition to a portion of LB2 and LB3. I'm a 40-year member of the, a 40-year veteran of the Arlington Volunteer Fire and Rescue Service, over 2,700 calls, and the author of the Future of EMS in Nebraska report. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Nebraska State Volunteer Firefighters Association and the 13,000 volunteer firefighters that serve Nebraska. The governor's tax proposals provided an exciting time for taxpayers. As a taxpayer, I strongly support these efforts. However, I also believe, as a conservative, that there are some essential services of government that merit a second look when exposed to the fiscal knife, specifically the delicate fabric of fire and EMS. As you know, this is a historic time for firefighters and EMTs. Calls are up significantly, and the number of responders is down significantly. The Nebraska State Fire Marshal's Office provides fire training for volunteers across Nebraska at no cost to themselves or their department. I have personally taken many of these classes in everything from basic interior fire skills to safe emergency driving to incident command. They are hands-on and they are intense. Volunteers rely on this training both for their own safety and for the life-saving services they provide. The State Fire Marshal's Office also provides investigative services that cities can afford on their own, but that rural residents and responders also need. Leadership in emergency response is so important, and State Fire Marshal Scott Cordes is the best that I have seen in my 40 years in fire service. He is driven, engaged, and inspiring. He is not a bureaucrat, and Chief Cordes and his office deserve the funding necessary to keep Nebraskans safe. LB2, specifically page 30, line 22 through about 25, and LB3 in several sections from pages 30 to 80, move much of the funding from the State Fire Marshal's Office to a fee-based system and away from the general fund. I would respectfully submit that at the very least, during this transition, that the stability of those funds are critical to public safety and should not be moved until the viability of that funding can be proven. Senator Dorn and Senator Mosier, to your point earlier about how that funding might move around a little bit, I do think that training is a huge priority for the State Fire Marshal's Office. But in tough budget times, when you have to make tough decisions, can anyone guarantee that that might not affect the volunteer in rural Nebraska's ability to receive this training? I would respectfully submit that's a little more questionable. Thank you, Senator Clements and the members of the committee. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next testifier.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jerry Stilmock, Jerrystilmock, testifying on behalf of my client, the Nebraska State Volunteer Firefighters Association, in opposition to portions of LBs 2 and 3. As you heard from others, Agency 21 would be removed $3.5 million of general fund money, make it up with cash fees. Historically, the fire marshal's office is integral in providing instruction to volunteer firefighters, in doing investigation after a fire occurs, as well as doing plan reviews for commercial buildings and dwelling units with more than 3 dwelling units within that structure. In larger cities, Omaha, Lincoln, Grand Island, Norfolk, they're able to pay their own instructors. They're able to pay their own investigators. They are able to do some plan reviews themselves. For the volunteers in the communities in which the volunteers serve, they're unable to do that. They rely on the state fire marshal. I want to take you back to a moment in time earlier, before any of you arrived on the scene, short of staff perhaps, but in approximately 2004, the fire marshal's office was funded by fire insurance tax premiums. So there was, I misspoke that. It was premium tax on the premiums paid. It's 0.75% for foreign, and within Nebraska, 0.3% for fire insurance premiums. That tax flowed in for the benefit and funding the state fire marshal's office. Think of it as a cash fund, as I did, perhaps. What happened was they said the funding wasn't coming in quickly enough, and the fire marshal's office was outside of its budget because the cash funds weren't coming in quickly enough. So with the instruction of the administration and what happened at that point in time, those cash funds in the form of the fire insurance tax were swept away. They went into the general fund, and the fire marshal now, as it has been since at least 2004, is subject to general funds. There is an item, and that item is used throughout the country, and that's the premiums on fire insurance. That's been removed. Perhaps that's the way to go. But with what's being proposed, with fees, we don't know what's going to happen. We foresee a gap. And the services, look, I don't know what's going on in the agencies that have come before you this morning, but when it comes to life safety and public safety and people's lives at threat, it causes me to pause, and I would ask you to pause as well. Is this an agency that should lose general funds in 24-25 fiscal year and allow on fees in order to be recaptured? First of all, they have to be set. Then they're going to have to be billed, and then they have to be collected before that office is going to be able to generate the funding. The fire marshal's office does a wonderful job. This past year and last year in 2003, there were over 1,000 volunteer firefighters, men and ladies, leaving their jobs, going on vacation, taking time away from their employment, and the fire marshal's office is so instrumental. We don't want to ever see diminishing service provided by that office. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here.
Sir.
I'm going to refer to a little bit, I think when the state fire marshal was here, Senator Dover asked him if any of the local, I think it was local departments were going to be assessed a fee for training or education.
Right.
Yes. What is your concept of that, or what do you?
Yes, sir. To both gentlemen, thank you for posing the question. 8-81-505.01 specifically provides in statute today that all of the training services provided by the fire marshal and the training instructors is provided for free for volunteers as well as career. However, if I want to become, as Senator McDonald, a firefighter in the volunteer sector, I'm not mandated by the state, but I want to be a good firefighter. I want to protect myself and the people that I'm going in to protect. It's Firefighter 101. State fire marshals trains. I have to pay $100 to get the book in order to take the class, sir.
Right now, you have to pay $100.
Absolutely. For the book. Training is paid for.
Training is free. Do you think that with this proposal, might that go up, or what is the fear, I guess, of your?
Because that statute is not being touched. To be clear, that statute, which requires the fire marshal to provide services of training for free, no, I do not.
When you say training for free, that includes the volunteer, all of the volunteer departments, and we have many of them around the state. We have some of the bigger ones are I know Omaha, Lincoln, Kearney, they're paid, but many of them around the state are volunteers, like my local squad. It's a volunteer. What do you see with this proposal? Do you see a cost coming back to them?
No, I don't. What I see are gaps in fees we have that protection right now, sir, of fees shall not be charged for training. But then it goes, comma, specialized training, the fire marshal can charge a fee. So I don't know what all is contained in that specialized training, sir, to answer fully your question, but it's a great question.
Thank you.
You asked about it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. You're very polite, sir. Part-time instructors, not just full-time, there are 6 full-time instructors that are providing services throughout regions of the state. There are additional part-time instructors. All of those, to my knowledge, are volunteer firefighters. These people are so engaged. They're compensated for their time. They're compensated for their meals. But they have to go portal to portal. Mileage is paid, but on their own time. There is no travel time by these people. These people are sacrificing so much right now. We're concerned.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all. Good day.
Next testifier.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. I am Chris Grams, spelled CHRISGRAMS. I'm here today as the president of the Nebraska Corn Growers Association in opposition to Section 12 of LB3. I'm also representing members of the Ag Leaders Working Group, which consists of Nebraska Cattlemen, Nebraska Corn Growers Association, Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska Sorghum Producers Association, Nebraska State Dairy Association, Nebraska Soybean Association, Nebraska Wheat Growers Association, and Renewable Fuels Nebraska, together representing over 90% of Nebraska's agricultural sales. The Ag Leaders continue to prioritize property tax reduction, but simply put, we admittedly oppose the transfer of funds from the Nebraska Corn Checkoff as proposed in LB3. By proposing this transfer, you are proposing a tax on me and my fellow corn growers, which is completely different than the investment that I make in the corn checkoff. While the balance of my testimony will focus on our opposition to the proposed transfer, I also want to relay that as the Ag Leaders, we oppose the language that allow the agency directors the authority to adjust fees for various programs without the step of an open hearing process. We believe that the affected parties should have the opportunity to provide input on rate changes. Currently, this is through rules and regs process. In 1978, early members of the Nebraska Corn Growers Association approached this legislature to initiate a program where corn growers could invest in the future of our industry. From this request and legislative approval came to the Nebraska Corn Development, Utilization, and Marketing Board, commonly known as the Nebraska Corn Board or the Corn Checkoff Program. For over 45 years, and as continues today, the legislature grants the authority and a board of directors to approve programs in the area of market development, research, promotion, and education. But as proposed in LB3, it would turn the investment I make in my and fellow corn growers' future throughout the checkoff in a general fund tax, thus taxing me again above and beyond the sales income property tax I already pay. I'm also testifying in opposition due to the bad precedents that this proposed transfer established. By bypassing the authority you granted the board of directors, the proposal opens the door to future legislators introducing a bad proposal to shift yet more funds into general fund type programs. Again, something we oppose. As we previously mentioned by earlier testifier, a similar transfer was proposed in 2009, which brought fellow growers numerous comments. All of the ag associations I am testifying on behalf of and other Nebraska associations and opposed to the proposal is ultimately not part of the final package, a step we request of you today. In closing, we request that you oppose and withdraw the section of the checkoff program transfer, thus eliminating a bad proposal and even worse precedents. I will note that Senator Ibach introduced Amendment 11 to strike Section 12, an amendment that we would support. Thank you for your time, and I'll be open to any questions you may have.
Questions?
Quick
Go
question. In the background here, you say the proposal would set a bad precedence in setting the foundation for future transfers. Do you apply that to any transfers?
Yeah. I would say that money that we invest, it needs to go to the market development, the education, because essentially we have to get kids back to the farming. And if we can't invest in their education to promote agriculture in Nebraska, which I mean, Nebraska is mostly agriculture, we're not going to have a farming economy. And with this, we have to keep the funding with the Corn Board.
That's helpful. I mean, we're hearing that from a lot of different other entities and boards. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. I've been here since 9 o'clock. I feel like at this point I'm an honorary member of the committee, but my name is Justin Hubly, Justin-Hubly. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of State Employees. Our union represents over 8,000 frontline state employees. They work for 43 different code and non-code agencies. They perform over 400 frontline jobs to all Nebraskans in all 93 counties. And I'm here today to express concerns on our members on LB2. The normal appropriations process went through and it was approved and positions were funded. The governor issued an executive order earlier this spring closing vacant positions and put out a press release shortly thereafter that said that he was going to reappropriate the funds for property tax relief. Of course, he doesn't have that authority. You do. And so now you're being asked to do just that. What I heard this morning from consultants was we have to do more with less, and we will try. Our members are committed to serving their neighbors and providing services to all Nebraskans, but most particularly those most vulnerable receive some of the most important services. And doing more with less is not going well right now. 1 in 5 state jobs is vacant right now. Even after the closing of some of the vacant positions, we're still in the double digits in terms of a vacancy rate. We're penny wise and pound foolish sometimes when we don't have a competitive wage and we don't fill vacant positions. And instead, we rely on overtime until people burn out and they quit and can't provide services. We're penny wise and pound foolish when we don't make investments in the right places. So while the consultant from Utah this morning said a lot of words that I really tried to make sense, and I've read the brief report and I can't make sense of it because there's not enough detail there. What our commitment as state employees is to the governor and to you is to work together. You don't have to hire a consultant to find effective and efficient state government. Ask the frontline state employees. Most of you have my number. We'll tell you where the savings are. We see it every day. And we want to make sure we can effectively and efficiently deliver services. In 35 days, under the State Employees Collective Bargaining Act, we'll begin contract negotiations for our next contract, which the next legislature will appropriate funds in January. I'm concerned, our members are concerned, that these cuts, if they go through, will limit what we can do in the future, because it's a cascading problem when you make these cuts. So on behalf of our members, we appreciate the governor has a noble goal of reducing property taxes, and you have a difficult job in trying to figure out how best to do that. We're begging you not to do that on the backs of frontline services to Nebraskans. It affects us all, whether it's a long line at the DMV, a road that goes unplowed, a child protective service, God forbid something happened to a child. I heard the deputy director of the foster care review office testify that they would immediately proceed with layoffs should this go through. I represent 20 members of the foster care review office. So please proceed with caution. We're here to work together, and you have a commitment from frontline state employees to work together with the governor and with all of you to find the best way to deliver efficient and effective services. Don't do it penny wise and pound foolish. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Next, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for waiting.
Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Emily Jacobson, EMILY-JACOBSON. I am here today in opposition of stance of LB3, Section 12. I am the Nebraska Agri-Ability Program Manager, but I speak to you today as a Nebraska citizen and lifelong member of Nebraska's agricultural community. I currently live in Petersburg, Nebraska, which is in Boone County, but my husband and I's agricultural roots are in Madison County, where we both grew up and continue to be active. I graduated with my master's degree in occupational therapy. Having grown up on a farm in Northeast Nebraska, I was passionate about agriculture as well as safe work practices and wanted to be able to tie my passions together. For the past 9 years, I have worked for Easter Seals, Nebraska with the Nebraska Agribility Program. This passion is tied together by keeping secondary injuries at bay, by recommending assistive technology to overcome disability, injury limitations, and allowing clients to continue to do what they love every day. In 2021, Nebraska Agribility sought out funding for clients who were unfunded through the vocational rehabilitation system. We received funding from the Nebraska Legislature for 2 years at $300,000 per year, serving 22 clients. In 2023, Nebraska Agribility again sought out funds for clients who were unfunded through the VR system. We received funding from the Nebraska Legislature for 2 years again at $300,000 per year. In the 2023-24 period, Agribility served 6 clients. While we unfortunately did not get that spent down, it was not due to a lack of clients it was not due to a lack of clients needing assistance. It was due to a staffing shortage on our end. We have begun a new fiscal year and plan to use those funds to serve more clients. There are at least 9 clients referred within the system that have the potential to utilize these services. To date, these funds have kept 28 farmers and ranchers actively engaged in their livelihood, which is priceless. This program has been creating hope, increasing independence, as well as improving the health and quality of life of farmers and ranchers in Nebraska. In addition, grant recipients are monetarily contributing to their community and state economy through increased purchases and taxes paid. This all being said, I truly believe that continued funding is needed for our farmers and ranchers with disabilities. However, I feel that these allocations should come from a generalized fund and not take away from the corn checkoff. The clients in Nebraska Agribility are not just corn farmers, but they're soybean farmers, beef producers, pork producers, wheat producers, hay producers, and so many others to name. The corn checkoff was designed to help develop, carry out, and participate in programs of corn education, research, market development, and promotion to enhance profitability and expand the demand and value of Nebraska corn and value-added corn products. This definition shows the intent of the corn checkoff dollars, and I do not believe that funding for our farmers and ranchers with disabilities falls under this allocation. We continue to see a need for assistive technology for farmers and ranchers with disabilities, and we will continue to look for matching grants and organizations such as Farm Rescue to help supplement our funding as well. Nationally, it is estimated that for every dollar spent on assistive technology for a farmer or rancher with a disability, there's an approximate $10 to $15 return in future taxes paid by keeping them employed. The Agricultural AT Fund is a program that really works, and it's really extremely tax friendly. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this proposal, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Next testifier. I have been told that the red light is not working.
Okay. Throw something at me or give you a red flag.
I have a gavel.
There we go. You're the man in charge.
Okay. Good
Chair
afternoon.
Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Annette Dubas, ANNETTE-DUBAS, and I'm the Executive Director for the Nebraska Association of Behavioral Health Organizations. In your last legislative session, we stood in strong opposition to permanently transferring $15 million from Program 38 Behavioral Health Aid in the Division of Behavioral Health to the General Fund. Today, we return and continue to stand opposed to LB2, which will transfer an additional $8 million from that same program. Over the last 8 years, previous legislators made a commitment to supporting behavioral health services through multiple rate increases. Those increases have finally enabled providers the ability to build capacity, which in turn has improved access to care for your constituents. After hearing about this bill, I reached out to a small sampling of NABHO members just to give you a snapshot of what they are experiencing. From fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2023, one provider in an urban area saw persons that they served increase from 3,222 to over 6,000. Another urban provider, beginning in January of 24, saw 5 consecutive months where they served more individuals than in any previous month in the agency's history. They have provided services to over 19,000 individuals in May of 2024 alone. A rural provider shared that short-term residential services and detox are in high demand. Last fiscal year, they were capped at 45 beds due to staffing. They now have the staff to be at 58 beds and are full. They receive over 100 referrals a month for those 58 beds. Another rural provider reports about 40 individuals on their wait list for services, with 3 to 4 weeks for new patients in their outpatient clinic. 2 regions are reporting an increase in utilization, with both close to 90%, and not all billings are complete as of yet. With the reduction of the $15 million for FY 23-24 and 24-25, they will be over 100% utilization and anticipate running out of funds in the last quarter of this fiscal year. This will result in either requesting additional funds from DHHS, finding other funding, or cutting services. We are still dealing with Medicaid unwind. I believe, looking at the website, there's around 17,000 clients who are still waiting for their review to be completed. So that creates some additional uncertainty as to how many of those remaining individuals will be eligible for region-funded services. The Department of Justice investigation and findings will require Nebraska to improve access to care for those with serious mental illness living in assisted living facilities. This will require additional funding for appropriate services and housing. And the Division of Medicaid and Long-Term Care are moving along with the development of their state plan amendment for the establishment of certified community behavioral health clinics. Once in place, these clinics will need support to bring up the required core services. So it is clear there is no room for additional cuts to behavioral health funding. In a letter we sent to Governor Pillen dated March 11th, we concluded stating that stepping back from adequately funding the current system will only make the mental health crisis worse. If there is a problem, if money appears as unspent, then let's sit down and discuss why and identify the existing roadblocks. As you could see from those few statistics I gave you, the need for services is there and it is growing, urban and rural. Now is not the time to take any additional money away from those in need of mental health and substance use disorder treatment and care. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions for you.
Senator Wishart.
Thank you, Annette, for being here. Is anybody from, do you know if anybody from the Regents is going to be here to speak to their own budgets?
No, I don't know that they are, no.
Okay. One of the discussions that we had in the last budget cycle was the issue with this being aid funding, where we continue to have underutilized funds. Can you speak a little bit more? I know Director Green spoke to Medicaid expansion being one of the reasons we may be seeing underutilization. Can you speak a little more to that? Because as an Appropriations Committee, what we're seeing is those funds just continuously year after year are not getting spent.
Well, I think we're seeing that utilization growing. As I mentioned, just one of the regions told me that by the end of this fiscal year, they're going to be over budget. So they're going to be using those funds. And I think it's because things are finally getting back on an even keel. We are getting close to Medicaid expansion and the unwind being completed. We're seeing those services. We're seeing the staffing reaching where it needs to be. Like I mentioned with those beds, they're now fully staffed and they have more need than they do beds. So I do believe that we're going to see a lot less of those dollars being carried over at the end of the fiscal year, simply because, and the Division of Behavioral Health, they provide a lot of gap services. So those individuals who, either fall off of Medicaid or, are kind of in between, that's where the regions come in and pick up that slack. So again, I think we're seeing that. The numbers are showing, and I think we're going to work on this, providing more solid numbers for you as we see the impact of the $15 million, the increase in utilization, the kinds of services. I can think right off the top of my head out in rural Nebraska, there are 2 providers who are increasing their crisis services and their detox. We have no detox out in rural Nebraska. So those providers are stepping up to try to meet those demands and to put those dollars into place. So again, I truly believe we're going to see that those amounts of dollars that we've seen over the last few years not be as big as they have been.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Laura McDougall, LauraMcDougall. I am the Health Director for the Four Corners Health Department in York, serving Butler, Polk, Seward, and York counties. I'm here today on behalf of the Nebraska Association of Local Health Directors to testify in opposition to LB2. As introduced, this bill would drastically cut over half of all state infrastructure funding to local public health departments and devastate the foundation of our public health system. The cuts we have identified are on page 36 of the introduced bill. Local health departments find ways to meet the expectations and needs of our local communities. We manage our budgets responsibly to cover as many critical health services as we can. We greatly appreciate the foundational investments that have been appropriated to our departments and work hard to find additional grants and other funding sources to meet specific needs within the communities we serve. Our communities value our contributions to the health and well-being of all in our jurisdictions. Teams in each of Nebraska's 19 local health departments find that the demand for our services continues to increase. The Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund and the Nebraska General Fund are the primary sources of foundational funding that allow Nebraska's local health departments to provide a range of services. We lead local and regional community health assessments and planning efforts, which improve access to healthcare and behavioral health services through collaborations with hospitals, clinics, schools, and other community-based organizations. We support local access to resources that impact health. For example, access to food, transportation, and housing. We are on the front lines for an infectious disease emergency, as well as available to assist with any other disaster or emergency efforts in our communities. We help people find care they need, including preventative dental services and programs to prevent and manage diabetes and high blood pressure, to name a couple. We deliver and support local programs to help Nebraskans prevent falls and age in place locally. We help families manage hazards in their environment, hazards like lead, radon, and issues with air and water quality. We work with moms, children, and families in home visitation programs to foster lifelong health and well-being. We take action to prevent the spread of diseases like salmonella, rabies, hepatitis, and many others. Investment in public health is smart for all of Nebraska. Nationally, every $1 invested in public health saves $5.60 in healthcare costs. The funding cuts in the introduced version of LB2 would devastate local health departments' capacity to perform our statutory obligations and do the work our communities expect and demand of us. We respectfully ask the committee to retain the funding for local health departments that was approved in the most recent legislative session. We also understand the committee may be working on an amendment, and we would be happy to work with the committee staff on any language or numbers that would be helpful. Thank you.
No other questions? Saying none, thank you for your testimony. Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Gibson, RACHEL-GIBSON, and you all might recognize me as the league lady, but that's not what I'm here for today. Today I am here as a citizen. First, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to folks share their thoughts and their concerns. And I particularly want to thank the senators who heard in Omaha and Lincoln, gave their constituents an opportunity to speak. So my husband and I moved here for his training, and we loved it. We decided to stay. We've been here 10 plus years. We've benefited tremendously from our community. We're happy to pay it into the funds that make that community wonderful, and to help out our neighbors when they're in need themselves. So when I looked at this budget, which, by the way, appreciation to the fiscal office, it was very helpful to look through that fiscal statement. I was struck by two things. And the first was the wide variety of things that were identified as reducing funds. And then the second one was, I was almost alarmed at some of the things that were listed. So, and this is where like my mom sense kicked in, and things like emergency management, behavioral health, public safety communication systems, corrections, and violence prevention. Because I follow the legislature, I also know that these were some really hard fought battles to get those fundings, and definitely a need for things. So that's what brought me here today, is I wanted to share that concern of what we love, my husband and I loved about here, we want to keep, and we want to help other folks. These are really big basic services that we're looking at cuts, and we already saw cuts this spring. The question is, why are we doing this now? And although property tax is a goal, there has to be some other way that we can still take care of the people in our communities. The two last things I want to highlight is, number one, what this looks like on the ground for folks. When we lived in Kansas, I worked for state universities. And I remember every year, even just with the yearly budget, we were just waiting to make sure that we could continue programs. And if things are moved this quickly between areas, it's hard to plan for good, effective programs. And then the second one is just, frankly, it makes it kind of hard to trust, because the community is advocating for things. People who are in the areas that are experts are asking. So when we look at the big picture, like asking us to trust that education is going to be funded, if we hand that over to the legislature, seeing things like this concerns citizens. So thank you for your time. I just wanted to share my perspective, and I appreciate you all very much.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, my name is Brian Thompson. I'm spelled BrianThompson. I'm the Vice President of External Relations for Consolidated Companies, located here in Lincoln. I'm appearing on behalf of the Nebraska Telecommunications Association, as well as my company. And I wish you all happy hearing day. Hopefully this gets over faster than we thought it might. Regarding LB2, I just wanted to bring up a few points and things that affect the telecommunications world in Nebraska. And that being, there is a $5 million takeaway from the Broadband Bridge Act that is being utilized to build out unserved areas with broadband these days. This is a really important fund that has been used to reach over 16,900 farms and ranches so far in Nebraska. And those areas are usually very expensive to build to, and they are in deep need of broadband service. To date, 100% of those dollars have been used in that fund that have been appropriated. And in fact, unfortunately, there's about 50% more grant applications than there are dollars to fund it. So with this money, we actually, as telecommunication providers, provide a match to the money and then build assets that are then taxed as property tax and pay sales tax during the time that we are building those assets. Due to federal rules and build out obligations, unserved locations and areas served by small and rural companies will not be able to utilize the new federal BEAD funds that are managed by the Broadband Office. That's approximately $400 million sitting on the sideline that cannot be used in 43% of the state. This money can only be spent to build unserved and underserved customers in areas located in the service areas of Lumen, Windstream, and Frontier today. BEAD funds have a higher regulatory burden also, and that is associated with those being funds from the federal level. And compared to broadband bridge grants, those funds are much harder to build a business case around. Nebraska's small and rural telecom providers can apply for BEAD funds, but we can only use them in those certain areas. With that, I'll conclude my testimony today, and I oppose LB2 for that specific reason.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Thanks for keeping the hearing room cool. It's refreshing.
Well, we've been working on that for about 6 years.
Let's hope we're not cutting HVAC, right? Chair Clemens, members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Erin Feichtinger, ERIN, F as in Frank, EICHTINGER, and I'm the Policy Director for the Women's Fund of Omaha. We're offering our opposition to LB2, specifically the dramatic cuts to DHHS, which will dramatically impact the ability of women and their families to either continue receiving the help they need to achieve economic stability or to access it in the future. The overall philosophy behind this bill is an attempt to reduce the size and spending of government, redirect funding to reducing property taxes. Now, reducing the cost of living and ensuring that Nebraskans can stay in their homes is, of course, something that all of us can agree on. The problem that we see here is that there are plenty of programs within DHHS which help low-income families in particular achieve that same goal, and jeopardizing future funding for those programs means that those families probably won't be able to take part in the relief that you're hoping for all Nebraskans. The problem of underspending allocations in DHHS, in our experience in advocating for programs and services in HHS, is not really a demonstration of a lack of need, but rather a failure of DHHS leadership and their choices to effectively allow people access into these programs. I think there have been attempts to make that process better, but really what we're saying is if we want to work together to find out what the real inefficiencies are, we should do that, and we should do it honestly, transparency, coming to committees with answers, for instance, this morning, and with the very serious intention of ensuring that Nebraska families are strong and stable, all Nebraska families. We should not simply look at a balance sheet and determine that unspent funds are wasteful spending, because they're not wasteful spending to the families that need it. The cuts in redirected funding in this bill will make it difficult for you and for future legislatures to do something like address the growing childcare crisis in this state, a crisis that is keeping Nebraskans out of the workforce and those same families out of the home ownership to enjoy the property tax relief that you're hoping for with these cuts. Thousands of people, including mothers and their families, would be impacted by possible cuts and decreased spending in these DHHS programs. It's hard to know precisely what that will look like because we don't know where these cuts are coming from or what the plan is. So when Director Corsi shares that with you, it would be great if we could also get a heads up on what those look like so we can prepare folks. Those families may not need help today, but they might need it tomorrow, and we believe that help should be available to them if that happens. I shouldn't have to say this, we all know this, but human beings are complicated, their needs are complex. It's hard to reduce them to efficiencies and spreadsheets, and they need flexibility. Director Corsi said this morning that he's not concerned about the future, but lots of Nebraska families are, and we're concerned for them as well. So the idea that we would drain funding now with the certainty that we will decrease spending on programs like public assistance in the future means that we will likely cripple these existing programs that are critical for Nebraska families and drastically reduce their access in the future. I'm sure we have some fundamental disagreements between what I said and members of the committee, but that's all right. That's what democracy is for, and I'm happy to answer any questions that, to the best of my ability. How about that?
Any questions? Seeing none. Do we have any more broadband people?
Was that now about broadband?
That's okay. we get one topic, we'll try to stick with it.
Okay, well, I think I'm the last one. I am testifying, Senator Clements, on LB3, and Mr. Thompson testified on LB2.
All right.
Members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Tip O'Neill. That's spelled TIPO''Neil, and I'm president of the Nebraska Telecommunications Association. The NTA represents 21 companies providing broadband and landline telecommunications services in Nebraska. We are here in opposition to a provision in LB3 regarding the use of earnings from the Nebraska Universal Service Fund. As you may recall, this provision was amended in LB 1413 on general file during the 2024 regular session. Senator Kavanaugh's amendment eliminated transfers from NUSF earnings after June 30th, 2025. The proposed amendment to section 86.324 in this bill would re-implement transfers of investment earnings from the NUSF after transfers to the 211 cash fund. This change is found in section 76 on page 107 of LB3. It is our belief that the NUSF is integral to deployment and maintenance of broadband in unserved and underserved areas of rural Nebraska. The amount of NUSF to fund current obligations for telecommunication services is almost equal to the balance of the fund. And finally, with respect to that argument, with significant money to be invested in broadband services in Nebraska in the next few years, even more money will be needed to maintain those rural networks. We can't build networks and then ignore them. We think a better solution would be to continue to accumulate earnings in the NUSF and then utilize those funds when necessary in the future. So we would ask you strike 76 from LB3. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? I'd like to also revisit why the broadband bridge funds are so separate from the BEAD funds. What BEAD funds can't be used for the broadband bridge, or could you answer that?
Well, I can. First of all, BEAD is a federal program.
Yeah.
A broadband bridge program was kind of the centerpiece of then Governor Ricketts' broadband economic development proposals for rural Nebraska with the passage of LB 388 back in 2021. And we've appropriated $20 million a year in state funds. Now, there have been other federal funds appropriated. ARPA capital projects certainly could be utilized for broadband, and we do have a grant program that is kind of ending at the Public Service Commission utilizing those funds. And then BEAD also was part of the Infrastructure Act passed at the federal level. But those funds won't get into Nebraska until sometime, most likely in 2026. And that program is administered by the State Broadband Office.
2026.
Yes. I guess what we find is that federal administrative requirements are always more burdensome than state administrative requirements. If you're a small company looking to the forward, these areas would have been built already if they were capable of making money without subsidy.
Right.
Okay, so if you look at the cost to your company of even if you get a 50% match from federal money or a 75% match, it still has to maintain a certain level of profitability through the years. And that's why, we're getting into pretty sparse areas in terms of the population. And the more sparse it is, the more expensive it is to build.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony.
Appreciate it.
Next testifier.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Lash, Lash Chaffin, Chaffin.
a staff member at the League of Nebraska Municipalities. And the League and the cities and villages that the League represents, we have concerns with several of the sweeps, including the Bridge Act sweep. Going back a couple of years, Nebraska, and the League represents those people hoping to get broadband. We're not providers. We don't benefit financially from this. We represent the economic developers in rural Nebraska that hope to get broadband. And a couple of years ago, Nebraska was woefully behind other rural states like Nebraska or New Mexico and Colorado. And between the Governor Ricketts's addition to it and the federal money coming through, Nebraska is starting to catch up. And you're starting to see hope in big chunks of rural Nebraska. And in some places, it's moving pretty quick. When you're out and about Nebraska, you see a lot of boring machines, and that's a good sign because Nebraska was behind. So the League is concerned about those funds. Secondly, the League is also concerned about the additional sweep from the military department, from the NEMA emergency funding. The complexity of emergency funding is head spinning. Everybody on this committee understands that. It's between the federal funds, the various state funds. It gets very complex very quickly, and the big thing to remember is almost all reimbursement is reimbursement. So in cities and villages and counties and other eligible entities, depending on the emergency, depending on the funding source, are literally being reimbursed for construction that may have begun several emergencies ago, several years ago. So what happens is if the funding is not there when your reimbursement comes due, then what happens is that local subdivision has to continue to pay for it out of, ironically, property taxes. So not funding the NEMA funding sources, in fact, will probably at some point lead to a property tax increase in some isolated place. And thirdly, the League is also concerned. I say this with a little bit of caution because I've learned to greatly respect Brian Tuma's analysis of a situation at the Crime Commission. But if there's $1 of that sweep that could be used to speed up getting people to the Grand Island Law Enforcement Training Center, I would hope you wouldn't deter that dollar because the crisis level is high, and I hope that we can get that solved. So thank you. I would certainly answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. My name is Elena Schreiber, ALANA-SCHRIVER, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of Service Providers, which are the home and community-based agencies supporting individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the people we support and employ. There are a lot of changes happening in DD right now. So any funding reallocations and their implications raise concerns and add to the collective confusion. When details about funding changes and policy shifts aren't clearly communicated, it leads to mistrust and speculation about the motives behind these decisions. Transparency is crucial for building trust with stakeholders, especially in areas impacting public services and vulnerable communities. The shift of $8 million in DD funding to the Healthcare Cash Fund raises questions. Understanding the rationale behind such moves is essential. And when asked about that rationale this morning, CEO Corsi chose not to speculate. I would have assumed he would have known the rationale behind that shift. Especially if there's existing needs, like addressing the wait list for services. And when I saw that shift, I thought it was a way to avoid the amendment in the budget bill that any unexpended funds would be pushed out to DD providers to address the wait list. And in LB2, there's also language striking funds specifically going towards the wait list. So it just seems confusing when the governor comes out and announces this big plan to eliminate the wait list that changes in this proposal take money away from what we thought would help address the wait list. So advocates and families have the right to ask for clarity and accountability in these processes, transparency in decision-making, clear communication of intentions, and a consistent approach to addressing the needs of the IDD community are essential for ensuring trust and effective service delivery. Services and supports for individuals are a key responsibility of the state. Ensuring that funding allocations are sufficient and appropriately directed, that policies reflect the needs and the rights of individuals with IDD, and that there's consistent engagement with stakeholders are all part of the state's role in supporting this community. Providers view ourselves as partners of the state. You guys have an obligation to ensure those services are available. We do it at a fraction of the cost of the state-run institution, but it doesn't always feel like a partnership is reciprocated. When legislation like LB3 highlights the importance of adjusting fees and payments based on the consumer price index for other areas, similar considerations should logically apply to service providers. If payment rates to service providers don't keep pace with rising costs, it undermines our financial stability and ultimately our ability to serve individuals with IDD. And without robust service provision, the state faces higher costs in addressing unmet needs, including more expensive institutional care and emergency services. The ripple effect also leads to significant economic and social consequences, including an increased burden on family caregivers like myself. When professional services are unavailable or insufficient, family caregivers must reduce their work hours or leave their jobs entirely. So not only does that affect the economic stability of that family, but also the broader state economy. And it creates a greater demand for state assistance for those families if they are forced to leave their jobs or reduce work. Investing in a robust HCBS IDD service delivery system is not only a moral imperative, but also a sound economic decision. It can help mitigate long-term costs, support families and caregivers, and ensure that individuals with IDD have the opportunity to live fulfilling lives within their communities. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions professionally or as a parent trying to navigate all the crazy changes that have happened this year and figure out, I was on the wait list, but I don't really know where my son stands now because he was one. I did note Corsi this morning mentioned the number of pending family support waiver applications, but he didn't say how many people are actually approved. I was in the first group of offers in March. We're still pending. And last I heard, only 12 people of the 2,700 on the wait list are actually actively able to use the family support waiver right now. I know Corsi said that there's no restriction in services, but actually since November 2023, they have not made any comprehensive DD waiver offers unless you meet priority 1 category, which means you're homeless, death of your caregivers, or their violence in the home. I don't think that a parent should have to kill themselves or beat their child up to receive comprehensive services for their child. Yes, comprehensive services are the most expensive, but that's because it actually addresses the full array of needs for that individual. So probably went over my 3 minutes, but the light is broken. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Oh, thank you for your information and testimony. Next testifier.
Good afternoon, Chair Clemens, members of the committee. My name is Ken Smith. That's Ken-Smith. I'm the director of the Economic Justice Program at Nebraska Appleseed, here to share a few remarks in opposition to LB2. And specifically, our opposition is rooted in the proposed cuts to DHHS administration, to our public assistance funding, and to the Foster Care Review Office. The simple basis of our opposition is that the proposed cuts would further impede DHHS's ability to effectively administer the programs under its purview, programs that are very critical in our state. So there are 2 categories, as the committee is aware, of funding, well, at least 2, as it relates to DHHS in this proposal. One is administrative cuts. The other is cuts to the public assistance funding. Important to point out that while we heard this morning that DHHS was in a position apparently to absorb these cuts without any negative impact on services, The Public Assistance Fund are the resources that is directly allocated to go to Nebraskans who are vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. Those funds, the vast majority of those funds are supposed to be passed on to Nebraska families. It's not possible to take money out of those funds, out of that fund, and not have that impact DHHS's services. That cannot be done. On the administrative side, another theme of this hearing so far has been looking at whether or not this proposal has adequately thought through the federal funding implications of some of the elements of this proposal. On the administrative side, a lot of the administrative funding that we dispatch as a state is matched with federal funding in the public assistance sphere. And so when we're looking at making cuts to our administration, not only are those cuts dangerous in the sense that in the world of public assistance, if you underfund administration, it leads to backlogs in case lists, overburdened caseworkers, delays in folks getting the assistance they need. But in this case, we're also putting less money on the table that is matched by the federal government. So I can't speak specifically to the number that may be at issue, but I would just urge this committee to take a look at specifically with Program 347 in this proposal, how this could impact federal funding that we're able to pull down. I will note too, it's just hard to reconcile the agency's position in their alleged ability to just absorb these cuts when every kind of proposal to make needed, even moderate, modifications to our eligibility systems, to our information systems has been met for the last several years with opposition that is cost-based. We're concerned about how these cuts will impact Nebraskans in the near term. We're even more concerned about how these cuts would put us in a precarious position in terms of agency readiness for the next economic downturn. That's something that we discussed this morning. The extent to which Nebraskans rely on these programs ebbs and flows. If we take away every dime of unexpended funds, we are putting ourselves in a very precarious position for the next economic downturn. We also just want to note quickly our opposition to the proposed reduction to the Foster Care Review Office, because as was stated earlier, it would have a detrimental impact on their workforce, which plays a critical role in oversight and data keeping in our child welfare system. So because these cuts would directly undermine our state's ability to effectively administer critical human services programming, we oppose LB2. I'd be happy to answer questions the committee may have.
Questions? Senator Wishart.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. We have heard a reoccurring theme today about Medicaid expansion being enacted in Nebraska, helping to reduce some of the costs, whether it be in behavioral health or our correction system. And I know Nebraska Appleseed was heavily involved in pushing for the expansion of Medicaid in our state. Do you can you talk a little bit to that? Because one of the talking points for voters was that it would reduce costs by more people being able to access Medicaid. Can you talk a little to that? And if not today, can Appleseed help us understand how this fits within the broader discussion that we're having today in terms of funding for these types of programs?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked about that. And I'm not one of our healthcare lawyers, but I can speak to that a little bit. But I think what I would defer to them, and we'd be happy to take a look at that and to work with you to make sure there's a full understanding of all those implications.
Yeah, that would be very helpful to get that before we start discussing these issues, because it's come up twice a day in the hearing, and so it would be helpful as we're making those decisions.
We'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the committee. My name is Juliet Summers, Juliet Summers. I am here today representing Voices for Children in Nebraska. For over 37 years, we've been a nonpartisan voice for children and families in the areas of child welfare, juvenile justice, economic health, child health, and family economic stability. And over those decades, we have seen budget fluctuations, both recessions and booms, and have consistently advocated for the funding necessary to ensure that every child in our state grows up healthy, safe, loved, and on a path to opportunity. And in light of that history, I am here today to share with you our opposition to LB2, underscoring specifically the crucial importance of a couple agencies and funds impacted by proposed cuts. We are gravely concerned about the potential short and long-term impacts of the proposed reappropriations and fund shifts pertaining to Section 34, the Foster Care Review Office, and you've heard the reasoning why today. This is an external oversight, data collection, and analysis agency whenever a child is placed in out-of-home care in either the child welfare or the juvenile justice system. And they also provide that oversight when a child has been out of their home for sometimes months, sometimes years, and then is placed back in their home in what's called a trial home visit to ensure that that safety is maintained when a child initially returns home. As you've heard, the proposed reduction and clawback is approximately 10% of the agency budget and would mean staff reductions. We are also deeply concerned about proposed cuts to 2 grant funds within the Crime Commission in Section 35, the Juvenile Services Aid Fund, and the County or Community-Based Juvenile Services Aid. They are 2 programs slightly separate, but they serve related purposes to reduce youth offending, to provide cost-efficient diversion services across the state, to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in youth justice, and to provide for effective alternatives to detention. And so we are talking about programs like mentoring, school-based responses, crisis intervention, emergency shelters, mediation, truancy interventions. And so I've appended to my testimony some more detailed information about the county-based Juvenile Services Aid Fund, which is a block grant fund created by the legislature to go statewide. This is from the fiscal year 22-23 annual report. And as you can see, in that year, the most recent year available, this funding provided grants for 173 programs across 81 counties. And I would note that for every program that receives funding through this, they have to undergo evaluation for effectiveness, including in the metric of youth recidivism or youth reoffending. So these are programs where we know that our dollars are being spent wisely because we are testing to see that the children who go through them are not then later reappearing in our juvenile justice or our criminal justice system. So these funds really operate as an investment in order to keep communities safe and to prevent greater costs down the line. The light has now gone out, so I will stop. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me. And thank you for your time.
Questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Joey Adler-Ruane, Joey-Adler space Ruane, and I am the Policy Director at Open Sky Policy Institute. I'm here to testify in opposition to LB2 and LB3. Our concerns are multifaceted, but rooted in the idea that responsible budgeting must be transparent, sustainable, predictable, and reduce risks. Opening the budget at this point in the biennium is unprecedented in economically prosperous times for our state. This bill provides for $116.7 million in one-time carryover reappropriation reductions and additional $83 million in ongoing general fund base appropriation reductions. 22 different departments will see reductions ranging from $25,000 for the Office of the Lieutenant Governor to nearly $81 million for Health and Human Services. Absorbing this level of cuts will undoubtedly make it more difficult for these critical agencies to provide programming and services at the levels necessary to serve all Nebraskans. Particularly concerning are the proposed adjustments to the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, such as behavioral health and public assistance. There is no concrete way to determine how these proposed budget cuts will affect service levels or impact outcomes for clients served by these programs. For instance, 88 out of 93 Nebraska counties report having a mental health care service shortage, underscoring the need for significant state investments. Many of these changes are apparently driven by the findings of the Epiphany report released earlier this year. The methodology for determining these cuts was not provided in the report, and Epiphany suggested they will follow a yet-to-be-determined system for evaluating performance after these services budgets are cut. The report makes the claim that these cuts will not impact how services are provided, nor the number of people being served. We find that claim to be suspect. The special adjustment of the biennial budget is unprecedented outside of significant budget crises. The people of Nebraska would be better served by waiting to craft a new biennial budget in January with the collaboration, consideration, and transparency Nebraskans have come to expect from this process. As for LB3, it proposes a 30% reduction in the state's cash reserve, or $235 million over the next 3 years. $200 million of this amount will be distributed to the general fund in fiscal year 2027. This deduction will bring down the cash reserve below the recommended minimum amount of 16% of general fund receipts. This fund is meant to be used when the state is in economic distress and should be maintained at robust levels for those purposes. Depleting it for funding property tax relief puts the states in a risky budgetary position should a recession or economic downturn occur. To summarize, our opposition to LB2 is not only because of the budget cuts to key services that impact vulnerable Nebraskans, but also because of accountability that is ambiguous at best, non-existent at worst. LB3 transfers additional funds into the general fund and not for their intended purposes. I thank you for your time and consideration today. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next testifier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, committee members. My name is Edison McDonald, EDISON, MCDONALD. I'm the executive director for the ARC of Nebraska. We're the state's largest membership organization for people with developmental disabilities and their families. I'm here today to express our concerns regarding LB2, including cuts to the Secretary of State's office, agribility, behavioral health, but most importantly, the shift of funds from developmental disabilities to the general fund, then moving funds from the healthcare cash fund to developmental disabilities. Concerned that these funds need to be built in sustainably into the budget. I'm not sure how this is intended to operate moving forward. While we're glad to receive healthcare cash funds, as most other states have used these funds for developmental disabilities. However, in Nebraska, we have not. I believe it will be important for this committee and for the governor to make clear how that will continue to operate in the future. Other than that, I'm going to truncate my remarks because y'all have had a long day and just indicate that Elena earlier from the Nebraska Association of Service Providers really well articulated a large variety of our concerns. Our developmental disability system seems to be really just kind of crashing down. We were very excited when Governor Pillen announced that he had a plan to eliminate the wait list for developmental disabilities. However, it seems instead of eliminating the wait list, it's just going and really kind of moving things around. In particular, really limiting critical residential services and saying that just access to Medicaid can support it. Basically, really, it moves to leave families stuck on the hook back like they were in the 1950s and 60s. This is a problematic approach, and we're very concerned. In the letter that you can see I've handed out to you, it carves out a variety of state and federal violations that we've found within this plan. In particular, already limiting residential services is very concerning. If they want to do that in the future, that's something that needs to go through this body. However, to already have acted on it is very concerning. Without a plan, without clear direction as to how this is going to operate, we can't support anything that would move these funds around. That, I'll take any questions.
Questions? Senator Dover?
I don't know for sure if you'd be the right one to ask, but
Mhm.
it's been explained to me that, I mean, obviously, if we were all kind of in need of something and we all showed up and said, hey, we need this, and they go, okay, here's this, and give everybody the same thing.
Mhm.
Obviously, everybody doesn't need all of that.
Yes.
And so, as someone expressed earlier, we have unlimited needs, unlimited resources. And so to me, it makes sense that someone doesn't get all the same stuff, because give them what they need, and that allows cost savings, whether it's on both sides. So you have tax dollars perhaps, and you can take care of more people with your limited funds. But why would you say this is a package and give everybody the same package when there's varying needs?
Yeah. And I do appreciate how the department has moved away from the just one size fits all mindset, which has been problematic. That was something that we've brought to the body and brought to DHHS. However, I think that this plan, what it does is it it kind of instead groups people in ways that won't necessarily work. And in particular, it's those residential services for those high needs individuals that really this plan kind of eliminates that. So they don't have any pathway to make sure that those individuals can have supports ever. At least right now, there's like a time, 6 to 8 years is a huge wait, but there is some sort of time in which you know that you'll get services. Otherwise, you're stuck currently with Section 83-1216 of the revised statutes that basically sets out a priority structure. And priority structure 1 that the department has indicated is the one they're going to utilize as the standard for residential services is way too high. It means that basically, as Elena said earlier, you would have to either die as a caregiver or have the life of your loved one be in danger, or have them become homeless. And not that they're going to be homeless tomorrow, but that they're already homeless. So that plan just doesn't really jive. And unfortunately, we don't have any really clear strategic plan that we would see typically from DHHS with a project like this that lays out how this would work. And it seems like it's left a lot of those gaps in its wake. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for your testimony. Welcome and thank you for waiting.
Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon.
My name is Elaine Menzel, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm here, I'll spell my name. It's ELAINE-MENZEL. I'm here today on behalf of the Nebraska Association of County Officials in opposition to both LBs 2 and 3. And I'm here essentially on a number of the other topics that have been raised by prior individuals. I won't be repetitive of their testimony. I will mention them briefly in a second, but first of all, I would like to express our appreciation to Senator Ibach and ask that you please consider supporting her amendment 8 to LB2 that she filed today. It would restore funding for the noxious weed program that was earlier eliminated apparently this summer. And then some of the appropriations that we have identified, and this may not be all of them, but well, and first, before I go on to say that, please let us know, or please be assured that we will be glad to work with you and attempt to address those issues as we move forward. We would be glad to be part of the conversation and to see how we can best implement some of those things if they do come to fruition. Some of the things that were identified were spoken of related to election-related services, a couple of programs which Ms. Summers referred to related to the community-based juvenile services aid. Want to express a great deal of appreciation to you for your support through the years. Nebraska stands out as a state when I go to national conferences and see the support that we provide for those juvenile justice programs that she mentioned. There is also a second aid or grant program within the Community or Juvenile Services Act. The problem with those juvenile ones, there's essentially 3 times in some of those programs needs for what are being able to be obligated. And as I indicated, some of those are obligated, and therefore there's been places that have planned to do operations and that type of thing, so they would have to cut back on that. Also, the behavioral health aid, which had been previously discussed by former Senator DuBois, the healthcare cash fund, broadband bridge fund, and then also the things that Lash Chapman testified about regarding emergency funds, law enforcement training, and the broadband. So I'm going back and forth on a lot of different issues, but hopefully I have addressed everything. I would respond to any questions if you happen to have any.
Any questions? Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wanting to testify? Seeing none. Are you here? You may.
You can fill out the paperwork right afterwards. You can
Go ahead.
come up and testify. Sorry.
Just about to finish, so you just made it. Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, I'm out of breath.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Cindy Maxwell Ostick, CINDY MAXWELL -OSTDIEK. And Senator Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee, I've been listening to your hearing today. I have real strong concerns as a everyday member of the Second House. And I just wanted to express my alarm at listening to all of the testimony in your committee today about these different services and these vulnerable Nebraskans that will be left behind with this budget. And I know many of them couldn't be here today. This was such short hearing notice because we're in a special hearing or special session. And so many Nebraskans couldn't get off work, or they couldn't find daycare or otherwise make their way here. I'm on my way actually from Omaha to Hastings for a funeral this evening, and I was lucky enough to just get here in time. I wanted to say that this special session is something that should have been adjourned already. I really wish that you would have voted yes for sine die last week. These types of changes to our budget and what is being proposed with taxes are something that really needs careful consideration and input from the Second House. And we can't do this in such a chaotic and short type of notice fashion. So I just wanted to express my real alarm at these cuts that are being proposed and to ask you to please make sure and keep in mind vulnerable Nebraskans who need these services.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, thank you for your
Thanks.
testimony.
I'm sorry, I'm out of breath. I literally just walked in. Thanks.
That's okay, and we know how parking is too. No, we're just going to adjourn. We'll be concluding. That concludes the hearing on LB2 and LB3.
Did you
And I
put
like
the-
my